Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you again for being here. We've been taking advantage of these briefings each day to brief the public with updated information and to really give our leaders a chance to address ongoing concerns that we're seeing in the community. At this time, before we get into our briefing related to the data, I want to call up the mayor. Mayor Walsh.
Great. Thank you, County Executive, for continuing to provide this platform for us to share important information. Today I want to talk about social distancing and the importance of it. You've heard the County Executive talk about it every day. You've heard me talk about it. Good news, bad news. Good news is most people are listening. There are indications of that all around us, from going out in the streets to even our crime statistics. Crime is down. So I want to start with the positive. Most people are listening, and I want to thank those individuals. Some are not. We received reports yesterday of our parks. It was a beautiful day, and there were a lot of people out enjoying our parks. Most of them were enjoying them appropriately, practicing social distancing, but some of them weren't, particularly young people playing basketball. We explored a few different ways in which to address it. I'm glad I have a good deputy mayor that gives me good advice, because my first reaction was to go up to the parks myself. Well, actually, I asked the deputy mayor to come with me, and she quickly reminded me that the kids probably weren't going to listen to me. So that was good advice. So we ruled that out. Then we considered whether or not that's something that we would want to call the police for. And I think we would all agree, despite the fact that crime has been down the past couple weeks, that our police officers have more important things to do than ask kids, or anyone for that matter, to follow the rules. If it comes to that, the police department's prepared to go there, but we don't want it to come to that, and we don't think it has to. Ultimately, we decided to take down the rims on the basketball hoops. Unfortunate, but necessary. Our skilled trades have been out all day doing that, and will continue to until they are all down. So I want to reiterate that while our parks are open, all of our facilities, all of our equipment is closed for use, and we expect that everyone will follow those rules. That includes our golf courses. The state has given direction that some golf courses can remain open under certain conditions, but our golf courses don't open until May 1st every year, so that's no different this year. So we don't want anybody out on our golf courses. If LeBron James and Tiger Woods can take some time off, so can you. Your game won't suffer too much. We are looking at other ways, understanding that not everyone is going to listen to me to get the word out. We did the county executive and I did a public service announcement with coaches Boeheim, Babers, and Hillsman, which we're going to be pushing out. We're looking for other individuals in the community that can speak to different constituencies and make sure we reinforce that message. People's lives are at stake, and everyone needs to take this very seriously. With that, I want to take this opportunity to introduce someone who we all listen to, Pastor Darren Jaime from People's AME Zion Church, to share a little bit more about the importance of social distancing and following the rules. Pastor.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, County Executive. I'm here today just to talk a little bit about social distancing, to help us understand the importance of social distancing, because social distancing in its best continues to help to flatten the curve. But in addition to talking about social distancing, I also want to talk about medical distancing, because there are some people who need to get tested. And we want to encourage people who need to get tested to get tested. If you show symptoms, if you show signs, we want to make sure that those persons are going and getting tested. Particularly in communities of color, there's the opportunity for higher risk and vulnerability. Many times in communities of color, you have people who are disproportionately affected, COPD, asthma, high blood pressure, those things, and they're at higher risk. And as our hospitals continue to fill as we get towards the curve, we want to make sure that people have the best chance of recovery. And so we want to encourage as many people as can and will that show the signs, show the symptoms, to get tested and to come forward. There is medical help out there, and there's a great amount of doctors and nurses who are doing great jobs in order to be able to help. So social distancing must continue, but we also want to make sure that we're continuing in the area of not following medical distancing. We want to follow the advice of our doctors, and if we know something is not right with us, we either stay home, we call the doctor, get checked out, and hopefully that we'll be able to flatten the curve together.
Thank you. At this time, I would like, we've talked a lot about various scams that may be going on in the community, and that how the government doesn't call you and ask for your social security number, but Sheriff Conway has been dealing with this for a period of time, and I want to call up Sheriff Conway to give some words and brief us on some of the things that our sheriff is seeing. Sheriff?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome the opportunity to come here and explain a few things, try to clear up some situations, some continued misinformation out there as it relates to public safety, and then also try to answer any questions that you may have. I want to start out by saying that I have been in contact with all my colleagues in law enforcement throughout the county, town and village chiefs, myself, city police, as well as federal agencies. And as recently as yesterday, we had a phone conference, which we are doing on a regular basis now. And the real purpose of that conference was for all of us to have a uniform message when it comes to not only policing, but public safety as we move forward in this situation. And I can tell you, as you've heard me say before, we have an excellent working relationship in Onondaga County and actually central New York when it comes to law enforcement as far as cooperation. And that is bearing fruit right now. We are all on the same page when it comes to how we're going to address or have been addressing certain types of calls, but also going forward, what other actions we may take. It's also important that not only do we keep our communities safe, which we have the responsibility to do each and every other day, but we need to keep our own members safe and healthy. If we don't have proper staffing in our police departments, then that would greatly impact the community and the calls that we are called upon to respond to each and every day. You may have saw a release that went out earlier from Sergeant Sieber. I again want to just clarify, as the county executive has over the last few or several days, there is no curfew, certainly in Onondaga County, and there is no travel ban. We of course want people to stay home, as the message has been, but it does not prohibit people from traveling in their vehicles throughout Onondaga County. As far as the question about complaints relative to people gathering, we each and every day, regardless of the situation, respond to calls of people who don't follow rules, people who break the law. This is nothing new to us. And just as in those types of situations, now in these, we are asking for people's cooperation. And from what I've seen, there's been a tremendous amount of cooperation. But like in anything else in our community, there are always those who feel they don't need to follow the rules or just don't care to follow the rules. And so our response is we will respond to each and every complaint that comes through 911. We'll service that call, and we will do what we feel in that situation is the best course of action. Certainly we're going to note this, we're going to take reports, but each and every circumstance is unique. But what we are going to be asking when we respond is for those people to be cooperative with us and hopefully correct that behavior and not repeat it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sheriff. And the sheriff will be here, so after our briefing we can have questions if you have any questions for him. But again, thank you. It's been about almost 2 weeks since we've had positive cases here. First positive case, I believe it was about 10 a.m. on Monday, not this past Monday, the previous Monday. We've been talking about preparing And then we went from planning and preparation to mitigation before we got into this process. But here we are, and we have new numbers. Let's see here. We currently have 123 positive cases. That's up 12 from yesterday. That is a decrease in numbers that we had been seeing. We've been seeing an increase higher than that each day. This is good. We're getting more data in. This allows our health department to identify the positives, work with those families, quarantine those that need to be quarantined, and that's certainly important. You've heard a lot about our strategies on testing, and everybody talks about testing. And I just saw a couple more articles about testing. I think it's important that people understand the rules on testing. There are people who believe that every single human being should be tested, and then you would know how many people are positive or not positive. That's a fantastic idea. I wish in our county we could have 470,000 people tested today. We would know everybody who's positive today in quarantine, and we could flatten the curve today. That's not a reality. The reality is that the health department has guidance, the primary care physicians have guidance, and due to that guidance, they determine if somebody needs to be tested. There has not been a case in Onondaga County where there's not been a test kit for somebody who a doctor said needs testing. If a primary care provider did not have testing that day, they could have referred them down to the triage testing site where there's been testing kits. So we have been testing robustly. We need people, if you are symptomatic, to go and get tested. If your doctor, contact your doctor. If your doctor says that you meet the criteria to get tested. To Pastor Jaime's point, the way we really flatten the curve is we make sure sick people get tests because we have them. Let's break down the data of who we have. Out of the 123 cases, we know that 10 of them are contacts. That number may increase with the investigations into our new cases. What are contacts? Those are most likely family members, people who live within the same house, or people who are in a quarantine that had a direct contact with the individuals. We have 64 females. We have 59 males. We have 5 individuals under 19. These are all teenagers. There are no children in that number. We have 30s in their 20s, 30 people in their 20s. We have 16 in their 30s. We have 19 in their 40s. We have 22 in their 50s. We have 16 people in their 60s. We have 12 in their 70s. And we have 3 in their 80s. We have 18 individuals that are currently in the hospital. 12 of these individuals are in good shape, good condition. 6 individuals are in critical condition. We've had 2 people who have been in the hospital but have been discharged, and now they're back home. That does not mean that they are COVID-19 free at this point. That just means they are no longer necessary to be in a hospital. They're feeling better. They're back home. We have 349 plus people in a mandatory isolation and quarantine. When you add that in together with our positive cases, we have well over 400 people that are in quarantine. 28% of our residents that are tested positive are under 30. 41% of our residents are under 40. 57% are under 50. 75% under 60, and then 25% are over 60. Our geographical breakdown: 42, City of Syracuse; 18, Town of Clay; 13, Town of Cicero; 11, Town of Salina; 8, Town of Camillus; 6, Town of Manlius; 6, Town of Onondaga; 5, Town of DeWitt; 4, Town of Pompey; 3, Town of Lysander; 3, Town of Skaneateles; 1, Town of Geddes; 1, Town of Lafayette; 1, Town of Spafford; 1, Town of Van Buren. When we have a positive test, I've had emails of people who live in these communities saying, why haven't I been alerted about who this person is? You will be alerted through a health department investigation if you're deemed to have contact with an individual. Now, this does not mean if you were at the grocery store and this person may have been at the same grocery store as you, that you had direct contact with an individual. So that would not merit a contact from the health department. But we will not be giving out names of people who live within your communities. These people have done nothing wrong. They got sick. That's all. So far, we've had 2,500 test results back, 123 positives. We had 275 tests back since yesterday. Yesterday, we had over 675 tests back. The backlog of testing from the beginning of last week is now really coming through. I'm pretty confident by the end of the day, most people from that Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday batch should have heard about their tests. Our current rate of which tests being taken turn out to be positive are 4.9%. That's moved down the last 2 days. The process after a positive result. Again, we have more people who have tested positive. We have more people under quarantine. We talked about this. Our anxiety is going to be up. There's going to be fear. We're going to know people in these situations. Let's talk about that process. And there's going to be a flow chart that's coming up right now. You can see from the flow chart, our health department will contact you if you test positive, and your primary physician will contact you as well. To begin the investigation, the nurse who calls will ask standard questions related to your health, and they'll gather the direct contacts a person has had since the onset of symptoms. That's what the investigation is looking at. Not that somebody tests positive. It's the day that they were symptomatic. If that person had contact with somebody the week before, you're okay. This is how they know who has to go into quarantine because of direct exposure. There is a difference between direct exposure, sharing a home, an office, or direct physical contact, and then that of just being in a building or being in a building like this right now where everybody is social distanced. Direct exposure is not passing an acquaintance in a grocery store or the fact that you share the same employer. Some employers are taking different precautions that they are deciding to take. They may be shutting down their building. They may be bringing in cleaning. Not all of this is done at our health department's recommendation. This is their decision that they make. Our health department does our investigation, and we identify everybody that we believe should be in a quarantine, and we are certainly very cautious with that. We always are on the side of caution with that. I can't say this enough. As we see more and more cases, we've been saying this for weeks before we had positive cases. If you are sick, you need to stay home. We've had cases where some people didn't abide by that simple rule. And now that makes our investigations more complicated. You put community members at risk if that's the case. So if you're sick, you need to stay home. You need to call your doctor. And if your doctor believes you need to get a test, they may do testing at their doctor's office. If they don't, they can call the upstate triage line and work on a plan for you to come to the triage testing site to get a test. Besides the positive test, we talked about it. There's now over 300 people in a mandatory quarantine due to exposure to a positive case. Our staff, rightfully in this process, is going to focus on the positive cases. We still need those in quarantine to be available and be accessible when we're trying to reach out to you. That's important, but those in quarantine, if they get to be symptomatic, need to contact their doctor so that the doctor can give them guidance. Again, we talked about this. We're hopeful that we will soon start seeing people coming out of quarantine. First case Monday, we'll hopefully begin a process where we start working with people out of quarantine on Monday who may have been affiliated with that first case 2 weeks ago. So again, please answer your calls from the health department. Keep your doctor informed. Anybody who has been tested must stay in quarantine until you get your test results back. Again, this is our executive order we put into place. Why do we do that? We knew that when you get a test, there's not a 24-hour turn time. We knew that. We knew that it could be 3 to 5 business days, and some days it has ended up being longer. So we put this order in place so that people are staying home. They're not potentially spreading whatever illness they may or may not have to anyone else. I know a lot of people are getting tips about potential specific cases. The way the process works is that unless there is a gap in the investigation of the health department, we are not going to put out a release for help. When we do have a gap or there's a period of time where we don't know, or there's a question if we don't know who this person has been in contact with, certainly we're going to put out information. We're going to seek the public's help. We're going to ask the public if they were in that building during those hours to come forward so that we can make sure you're being talking to your own doctor or our health department if they have questions for you. The mayor talked about social distancing. Pastor Jaime talked about it. I've talked a lot about it. Certainly, we don't ever want any age group or demographic to feel like we haven't been lecturing them at this podium, so let me just lecture our teenagers. Leave mom and dad alone. You're not allowed to go outside, okay? Mom and dad are getting stressed, and I understand you're getting stressed as well. You wanted school off. We gave you school off. So unfortunately, you're stuck home with your siblings and mom and dad. So again, we want to thank parents and everybody. The safest place is for you to be at home. And the sheriff is 100% correct. You can travel, you can go to the grocery store, you can go to essential businesses. There's nothing wrong with that. I know some people are getting confused about that. But you're safest at home. Your family is safest at home. And we expect you to abide by those rules. And the teenagers and the tweens who are driving mom, dad, and all their loved ones nuts about trying to hang out with your friends, we got to tough this out a little bit longer. Let's look at this, a couple things to run through, some important phone numbers and websites. Certainly, these numbers are important. The Upstate Triage Hotline, that's the number if you want to talk to a professional about testing at our triage testing site, 315-464-3979. Senior healthcare worker and adult nutrition line. Again, we're expanding this. I just had an individual who didn't meet the senior qualification by age, but he had an impairment. He emailed me. He was upset that he couldn't get a meal. We made sure he's getting a meal tomorrow. So if you have a challenge in your life, if this line is there, we're trying to help all of our vulnerable. 315-218-1987. Daycare, we have daycare slots available. We talk about this every day. This has been very useful for keeping our first responders, our essential businesses, and our healthcare community at work where we need them. Daycare, 315-435-1220. If you're in a bind, we have slots available for you. You can call that number with child, and then we will help get an appropriate slot free of charge during this period of time. Donations of PPE. This is emergency medical equipment. If you're a business that has these are the masks. These are certainly N95s. These are visors. Our law enforcement officers need these. Our emergency responders need these. Our hospitals need them. Our nursing homes need them. And right now, there's a lot of competition for them. So if you have these supplies, please look at donating them, 315-435-2525. Again, our mental health is important. If you're having challenges, you need someone to talk to, you need a break, call 211. We have mental health professionals there that can help get you through this, work on some techniques. We're into this process a little bit. Everybody's getting tired. Some days we're all a little crankier than others. Today I'm having a pretty good day, Tim. I think we're having a good day today, I think. But overall, this is tough, and we're getting through it pretty good, folks. So again, 211, it's there for us if you need it. So saying that, we got the mayor here, myself, Sheriff Conway. We can take questions.
Yesterday, you talked about there might be a need to make an example of someone about social distancing, and has there been any need to issue a citation or make an arrest or anything like that?
We get the 911 data, Tim, and we had 50 calls related to social distancing complaints. The sheriff has his jurisdiction that he works with, and then he helps complement other jurisdictions. So we'll call him up in a minute to talk about this. But the reality is our our law enforcement's going to be in a position where they're going to make a judgment call, right? The mayor's got his SPD. They're going to be in a position where they're going to make a judgment call. I think certainly there will be a point where there will be an egregious situation, whether it's somebody hosting a very large house party or a business operating off hours, and there's many people at that business, where I'm sure the law enforcement community is going to, whether it's issuing a ticket or whatnot. We're working with the district attorney's office on the various executive orders, what they mean, so the law enforcement partners they know, they have all the information and they understand all the tools that are available. Sheriff, is there anything you want to add to that?
Just to reiterate, again, it's discretion. We're not trying to have anybody held up as an example. Some of these situations probably will result in referrals that can be followed up later on, especially some of the ones that involve a civil penalty. I know that the Attorney General's office has a part in that. We've also talked internally and gotten some guidance as far as the criminal side. It appears that a section of the criminal nuisance penal law would apply in some situations, but we have to look at each and every one of these as their own situation. It's like most things. If we get called back to a house repeatedly, we get called to the same business that appears to be open, that of course is going to change the picture. But we're looking for cooperation. We're not looking for confrontation.
But of those 50 911 calls, did any result in actual substantial breaking of social distancing or specifically referrals?
My understanding is they resulted in warnings.
Correct.
Was that 50 since yesterday, or
Yeah.
since, yes?
Yep, popular topic. Again, look at when we have these discussions, the reason why we are serious about this and why we're having this conversation is because we're trying to flatten a curve of a virus that is making people very sick, and we're looking out for their own well-being. If they get this virus, you can get very sick, and we have 18 individuals in the community that are sick enough to be in the hospital, which nobody likes to be in, and we have 6 of them fighting for their life. We aren't doing this and talking about this because any other reason than we want you to be safe.
Mayor, can you speak to the Syracuse Police Department side of this? You mentioned deciding not to send officers to the parks where you can make a few tweaks before you get to that level.
Right.
But are they ready to actually go to a worst case where it's people continuing to gather?
They are. They've issued specific guidance to their officers. They've communicated with the sheriff and other police departments to make sure that we're being consistent in how we apply. But generally speaking, that the goal is educate and inform. In the case of businesses, we will forward. If we're called to a specific business that is in violation, the police department will write up a report and forward it to the state attorney general's office. In the case of individuals, again, the goal is inform and educate before any further action is taken.
Have you had to make any referrals of non-essential businesses that are open that shouldn't be at this time?
We have received calls, yes, and I can speak for the Syracuse Police Department. They have responded to calls. I can think of at least 2 that I was made aware of within the past 24 hours. In both cases, they were addressed and the situation was resolved. But yes, it is happening.
Can you talk a little bit about the governor pushing the date of schools to reopen back to the 15th and what you guys are planning to do, or if you talk to superintendents or anything like that?
Yeah, we gave an executive order, I don't know, Mayor, what was it, a couple weeks ago, where we brought everybody in. We looked at the calendar. We looked at we used some data. At that time, it was hypothetical of where we thought this could go, and we came up with a date of April 14th, right on there, right after spring break. I think it's a good call by the governor, and this gives everybody more time. And when you look at our curve right now, the majority of test results have come back in. Now we're working off really a 48-hour, a 2-day window with results. So our hope is that our curve starts to flatten. And if it starts to flatten, then what's the next step? How do you get it down? Well, you got to social distance and you got to starve it, right? So having that curve, if we can get this curve to start to flatten, and we're going to knock on wood, then you starve it for the next 2 to 3 weeks. That puts you in the kind of April 15th, maybe a little bit later. But this gives the governor, gives districts more time to let the healthcare risk work itself out. And then you have time to pivot in there. That's what we've been doing on a daily basis. You continue to pivot as you get more data. So, districts got to continue to figure out ways that they can stay in front of their students and try to keep their students up to par. And hopefully we have a school year at the end of the year here. I know my children are desperate to go back to school at this point.
In terms of that curve, how many people got tested yesterday at the triage site?
Yeah, a little over 100, and then I think countywide, Tim, not all those are county residents, but I think Onondaga County we had probably between 125 and 150 people when you add in hospitals numbers to that yesterday. So we think we're between 300 and 400 tests for Onondaga County outstanding right now, which are all, for the most part, recent tests.
So it's staying pretty flat at that 100 a day
Yeah.
level. For you or for Pastor Jaime, are you worried that there are people who are resisting getting tests when they have symptoms?
I will speak for me, and then if Pastor Jaime wants to comment. I hope that's not the case, because we worked very hard to keep our community testing every day, and we have the ability to do the tests. Other parts of the state don't have the ability to do the tests, so they're putting very stringent rules on who can get tested, and in some cases they're saving tests for emergency responders and for healthcare workers, but that's not where we are. So I think, to the pastor's point, if people are sick, and you got to call your doctor, if not call the upstate triage line, they'll do an over-the-phone interview with you, and if you're deemed to fit that model or that mold where you should get a test, come get a test. I think at noon today, Tim, again, this was noon, I think we only had 30 people at the triage site. So that curve's flattened out for demand, and it looks like it might even start to go down a little bit more, which we hope is a good thing. Because if there's more people that need to get tested, come get tested. There's no reason not to. I get it all, Pastor, or you want to add on to it?
Hi, Tim. Just concerned about making sure that people do get tested. If you have to go call your doctor, call your doctor. If you need to make your situation aware, and let your doctor know what those symptoms may be. So there's slight concern, but overall, from what I've been hearing, people, if they feel it, they've been responding.
Question.
Would there ever be enough test kits available to test people who aren't showing symptoms but are in quarantine because they were directly in contact with someone who tested positive?
Dr. Gupta and her team are working on a process for people coming out of quarantine, Andrew, what that looks like. We'll be able to talk about that probably tomorrow and or the day after, what that looks like. The reality is, if you look at the testing numbers in the state, the tests coming in from FEMA or the private sector, they've done over 60,000 tests in New York City, like 30,000 in Westchester, right? And massive amounts of testing, because that's where people are very sick. We've been able to test and test and test and test. I would be really disappointed if somebody's at home or going to work who might have symptoms and they're sick, and they just haven't gotten a test because they just feel like it's not necessary. We work very hard collectively as a community to make sure that we have tests. So let's take advantage of them.
Because I think there are people who feel that they were exposed to a positive case, know they were, don't feel symptoms, but worry, am I a carrier? Am I positive but not symptomatic?
Yeah, so within the 14, and again, the guidance could change, but right now in a 14-day period, you should probably show some symptoms, right? And then Dr. Gupta and her team are working on what procedures they're comfortable with to release somebody out of quarantine. and we'll talk more about that because we're going to be there Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday, where individuals will be in this 2-week period of time. So I know that their team's working very hard, and they'll have protocol that will be in the public's interest.
Do you guys have any information on how the new ban on non-essential construction work is going to affect us locally? Do you know if it affects the Dome project?
Yeah.
There's a big Housing Visions project on East Genesee Street that I wonder if it's going to have to stop midway.
My understanding is affordable housing will be exempt, and the Dome project should be exempt. I already had a call with the state on this. Regardless of the Dome project, it has to be exempt because that big metal structure on the dome isn't secured. They're still putting it up. So we're not going to stop construction and have 50-mile-per-hour winds presenting another public health challenge. So I called the state and just put everybody on notice on that, and I've talked to the contractor. There's other projects that are critical to this process. And if we have to work to get exemptions for those projects, we'll work with those construction companies. There's certainly some construction that can take a break for a couple weeks. We never want to say that. I think each region of the state's different. Certainly there's a stronger case to be made for this downstate. I think the case is weaker in central New York, but there's a process for us to go and make our case for exemptions if we think it's in the public's good. But the Dome project has to go forward with that roof being where it is right now. And certainly I think the Housing Visions qualifies for the exemption as well.
I know you talked about rumors and tips, and we've kind of gotten a rumor that an employee at a grocery store has tested positive for the coronavirus. If that was and they came in contact with someone, is that investigation still ongoing, or would they know?
I have not been alerted of a grocery store employee being there. That's not to say it didn't happen. What would happen is that the health department would start an investigation directly with their employer, their supervisor. They would then have to work to see any direct contact that they had with people, looking at their job duties, and then try to expand the network of potential contacts. And that's when, if there's a gap, you would then have me saying, if you shopped at this store at this time and you went through aisle 1, if it was that or whatnot, please contact us. You would hear from that. So I don't know that that's true or not true. Certainly, as this process goes on, people are getting positive tests who work in businesses or work in government where they could have exposure to people, and that's uncomfortable. And so that's when these rumors start flying, and I get it. It's uncomfortable, and what people need to understand, that's why we've kind of rolled out what the investigation process looks like, is we are going to be very cautious. If there is someone who we aren't sure had direct contact with, we're not going to say, you're fine. We're going to tell you to go into a quarantine. So I just think that that's why we're talking about that today, because we have more people who are positive. We're still going to get some more people who are positive. Hopefully, in the very near future, we're going to have people who are getting better, who are no longer positive. But as this is more real in our community, this anxiety is there. So we'll continue to address every rumor to the best of our ability.
What's the status of the National Guard in Syracuse?
Yeah, I got a tip. I might be getting that question, Andrew. There was not, look, the National Guard has not reached out to us to be part of our emergency management planning. My understanding is the National Guard may be working with the 174th related to warehousing supply chain. And again, if the National Guard wants to be a partner, and we got people that are here that want to be able to help, we can give them things to do.
How badly do you want to get up here and announce our first recovery?
Pretty badly, right? We're not there yet, right? But what's nice about this process for me is I'm getting to talk more and more to people that are reaching out to me who have been sick, and that means something. I sit here talking every day about people in numbers and data, but these are human beings who are been very, very stressed, and they've been very sick, some of them. And certainly it helps me through this process when I get to talk to them, and I'm their biggest cheerleader, and I can't wait till they all get better and can tell their stories when they're more comfortable to tell their stories.
And we had a concerned cancer patient kind of call from upstate saying that they're all using the same door no matter what they're going in for, and she was concerned because their immune system is obviously very low. Do you know anything about that, or?
Yeah, I can't speak to specifics about the different hospitals and different wings or anything like that. I mean, these our hospitals and our partners are very, very cognizant of all of their patients, and I'm sure that the concern is real, right? That person, they have a real concern, and due to the heightened state of anxiety in the community because of this, sometimes it's harder to believe the answers and to believe believe the facts. But I'm sure the hospital is following all the proper disinfecting protocol, especially with their high risk, certainly patients.
Are there any local manufacturers you can brag about who've specifically stepped up production of anything in the medical line, anything to help your emergency response?
Yeah, so a couple different folks. Cascade, I think, has been reported on, looking at doing some visors. They make the lacrosse helmets. We've been talking to them a little bit. Certainly 1911 is doing some sanitizer. There's been some other sanitizer being done. We got to make sure 1911 is still producing what they originally produced too. But in addition to that, the Tessie Plastics has reached out, and they have the ability to potentially manufacture some different things that could help stabilize supply chains. Right now, the supply chains for PPE is still complicated. It's not a 911 bell situation, but you're 4 or 5 bad days or busy days off from being a 911 situation. So to have a local manufacturer step into that arena and help out would be make us very comfortable here.
Any word from Hillrom or Welch Allen? I know they provided some equipment at the Allen Foundation for the testing site, but in terms of production in the Skinny Atlas area?
Yeah, Hillrom has been a fantastic partner with providing what they can. They've boosted up some of their production for the whole country. That's good. That's good for Hillrom here in Central New York, that this presents a business opportunity for them. They don't make ventilators and some of the current needs, but certainly having that relationship with the Allen family and Hillrom in all of their contacts in the medical space helps us better source different companies that do different things. Very lucky to have them.
I know the backlog of test results is pretty much resolved, although we're still hearing from a few people who are waiting. And I got a very specific question from one who wants to know, if she goes 14 days and still has no result from her test, is she released from quarantine?
My suggestion would be that she emails us directly so I can have Dr. Gupta and her team talk to her, and they can make that call. I'm not going to sit here and I've learned a lot about the medical profession over the last few weeks, but Dr. Gupta is going to make that call. So if she wants to email me directly, I will put her in touch with Dr. Gupta and her medical team. My guess is she will have a test result back before the 14 days. As you referenced, that logjam seems to have been broken, and everybody should have the results back later today, is what we've been told.
And the community health center will continue testing through the weekend?
Yep.
And is the processing lab still, do they still take the weekend off, or do they now?
My understanding is they're going through the weekend as well.
They work through the weekend too, so
yes.
it should be 24 to 48 hours from whatever day.
That's my understanding, yes. Now, mind you, that's not with some of these other facilities. I don't know what Krause's is doing. I heard Krause's is not doing weekends, and depending on where else they go, the partnership where we've been working directly with the triage site at the Syracuse Community Health Center, helping keep that staffed up, keep the materials staffed up. We've also been in constant communication with Upstate on this. Those have been the two busiest facilities really for testing in the community. So Krause's may be doing weekend testing now. At one point they weren't. So it's different. And again, I've heard from someone today who went primary care provider. She does not know who the primary care provider used in their test. Again, fifth business day, she's frustrated. I said, who is it? I can try to figure it out. She didn't know, right? So I'm getting these emails. I'm responding to every one of them. I want to help everybody we can. Our staffs are doing things they never thought they'd be doing. But that's what we do as a community to get through this.
Mayor, could you speak to the loan program you announced last week? And now that the application process opened on Monday, how many applications have you gotten?
Yeah, so the loan committee met today at noon. I haven't gotten an update from them yet, but at last count yesterday, they were at 30 applications. So of those, I'm not sure how many were approved. We'll get an update out, but it's going fast, and the feedback from my team has been that it's evident that those resources are sorely needed. So once we get through that, we're going to be looking at other resources.
And the approval sounds like it's happening pretty quickly after applications.
Yeah, the loan committee at least initially agreed to meet once a week. So again, they met, applications open on Monday. They met today at noon, and the goal is to have money out the door next week. We'll get an update out as soon as possible.
Anything else?
Just a couple of detailed data questions. The 18 in hospitals, that is like current today. It does not include people discharged.
Correct. So there's 18 in the hospital. 2 people have been in the hospital, have been discharged, and there's 6 in critical condition.
And the 349 in mandatory quarantine is in addition to the 123 with positive tests?
Correct. Okay. Now, quarantines are tough. It's right now they're going up, but Monday they're going to start going down, right? So that number will be a little fluid, but yep, that's and Dr. Gupta and her team are still, they've received over in the last 36 hours, 30 plus new positive cases. So certainly that number will probably go up for tomorrow's briefing as they finish up different investigations, certainly.
The only other general question I'd throw out is the trend, the increase in cases, the increase in hospitalizations. Is there anything about it that is surprising to you or worrisome, or is that pretty much expected?
No, I think the increase of cases represents the spike in testing last week. This is the timing, right? What I would hope we will see is that we will have a scenario where our results are now coming in 48 hours. Our percentage of 4.9% is a good percentage. If that percentage holds out, we're going to see the curve move up a little bit more, and then we're going to be at that 2-week period where some of our positive cases are going to get better. So even if we get some new ones coming on, we should have some ones coming off, and that curve starts to flatten. And so then how do we as a community get that curve to bend? And that's really the social distancing, and that's really starving out the contacts. Hopefully if we do that, our new cases are contact cases from our quarantines, and we'll have some of those, right? Some people were there, and then our contact cases come on and people keep getting better, and we start to see this thing bend, and then we can focus in at some point on what economic recovery really looks like. And that's something we're working on now, but that can't be the focus yet. The health has to be the focus until we bend the curve.
For Mayor Walsh, LeBron or Jordan?
Ooh.
Carmelo Anthony.
Oh, Even better.
Homer.
Even better. Honest, nimble.
Oh, is it time? Okay. First of all, for your planning, my station is giving me the weekend off. So you're going to have to fill in and offer the good news without
will.
my question the next 2 days. Adrian will be here asking
Okay.
other questions.
All right, Adrian. All right.
But for today, what's the good news?
So look, at one of the major concerns in the community over the last few days was I had many seniors reaching out to me about their Tai Chi class. And I don't know if you've ever seen Tai Chi, but I'm not going to practice it right here.
Would you please?
So we have worked in coordination with 100 Black Men, and there will be the senior Tai Chi class on Zoom. So Andrew, that is the good news. Thanks, folks.